Originally from the ArchCast on November 5, 2022. This is an exploration into how we could interpret the current situation with Elon Musk and Twitter. It starts with a brief philosophical overview of two theories of history before coming to the conclusion.
So, there is what appears to be, to me, an apparent conflict here between two theories of history. In fact, three theories of history, I would say. One theory that is clearly dead and buried at this point. Prior to the Italian theorists, in the 20th century, there were two serious theories of history that were considered. I guess we'll call it the mainstream liberal view of theory of history. So it's like the historical events are inevitable, right? They're the product of forces that build and ebb and flow, and it's a natural emergent, the events that are going on. And this theory is favored over Thomas Carlyle's theory that's called the great man of history theory, where exceptional individuals use their talents and acquire power and influence and literally change the course of history. Bo and I have basically come to the conclusion that there is an overwhelming amount of evidence for the great man theory. We can name them, if you like. There's the Napoleonic era. It's called the Napoleonic era for a reason. There is a lot of evidence. Now, that's not to say that the emergence theory has no legitimacy and nothing to support it, but I think that it's confusing the wood for the trees, right? You have to have the conditions for a certain kind of great man to appear, yes, but the direction in which things go does appear to be organized by individual great men of history, right? People who have got power and influence and find themselves in the confluence of circumstances that allows them to exercise their particular wills.
Whig historiography.
We're talking about how things happen rather than what's going down. You know, Whig theory of history, you could believe that and believe in the great man of history, right? So Tesla himself is often a favorite great man of the Whig historian. So men like Tesla will create amazing things and it's inevitable that the world will get better if you subscribe to the great man theory. But if you subscribed to the emergent theory, you would say someone like Tesla would come along inevitably because all of the forces are converging towards this happened.
Okay.
And so the emergent theory is not, like I said, not without its merits. And it's not that it's not true, it's that it's not in contradiction to the great man theory. Because the great man theory is evidently true. Like, Alexander could have chosen not to invade Persia. He could have chosen not to. He had to have been gifted the army by his father in order to be able to make the attempt. But the options were on his plate. He gets to choose, right? And so there's no question that there is a great man behind every major historical event. Like, without Adolf Hitler, does World War II happen? Well, I don't know. Probably.
Because if not Hitler, it would have been the next guy in line. Because everyone
in his you're thinking of.
Sorry, what?
Name the orator that you're thinking of.
Oh, it might have been Himmler, you know.
He would.
He would not have been Himmler. I can guarantee you that.
See,
this would not have been. But
the
point that I'm getting at is that at this point, I've read enough about Hitler and his inner circle, is that they all had the same ideas and they were all moving in the same direction. It's just that Hitler was in charge, but it could have been somebody else.
But Hitler who was dragging them along. Like Burma and the rest would have still been in beer halls if it weren't for Adolf. But I do agree. World War II might not have happened, but a conflict would have happened simply because Germany had been pushed too far.
Yep. But this is the point, though, Arch. Right? You got it exactly right. And this is Carlyle's point about the great man: is that it doesn't compound. Right? You don't get an Einstein if you collect together 100,000 midwit scientists. There's no Einstein. Right? There is just Einstein. And you have to have his particular unique characteristics. And in the case of Adolf Hitler, as you instantly said, it's not going to be Himmler. Himmler was not a charismatic rhetorician.
He was also actually retarded.
Yes. Hitler, for all of his flaws, obviously, he had amazing talents in certain areas, and rhetoric was one of them. The ability to make people believe and be persuaded and follow him was genuinely a phenomenal skill that Hitler had. He put it to evil ends, obviously, just in case someone like is thinking, I think, could well have. But he's got this dark majesty, right? And this is what the great man of his theory is saying. No, none of the other Nazis could have filled Hitler's shoes. They couldn't have done what he managed to do. And so actually it takes this rare confluence of circumstances coming together to form a particular nexus and then happening to have the right guy for the job. Because there have doubtless been lots of times in history where the confluence of circumstances have come together, but no one was the right man for the job, and so what could have come out didn't come out. Right? Now, obviously, it's difficult to give examples of this, but it'd probably awesome if I would sit down and give it some thought, right? And so these are the two sort of traditional theories. And then in opposition to this, we have Nima Parvini's elite theory, we'll call it. He's just a sort of the distillation of the Italian elite theorists.
Hold on.
Now,
before you move on to the elite theory, I have a question about what you said previously first, because I know that you're a Burkean conservative at this point, but this seems to stand in contrast with that in some way. So you mentioned that you can't take 100,000 scientists and get one Einstein because Einstein's unique, right? Well, wasn't the whole point of Burkean conservatism is that your culture and your traditions are the collected knowledge and wisdom of everyone who's come before you, and you should therefore listen to them rather than reinvent the wheel?
Yeah.
Well, it seems like in that case, you probably could get 100,000 people and still get maybe not Einstein, but a lot of Einstein.
No, what you're going to get from 100,000 generations of tradition is a lot of trial and error. So if you're looking for common sense, pragmatic solutions to problems that everyday people face, tradition is a fantastic set of solutions because it's been tried already. And so these are the solutions that emergently came out of that. And that's correct, right? But we're not trying to create an atom bomb. Like, you're not going to develop the atomic bomb through a tradition.
Because I'll add to that too. The atom bomb could not have been built without tradition because it required a tremendous amount of other expertise as well.
Sure.
Like the US poured billions into an enormous building project. They constructed entire cities of specialized material, the colliders, armored fucking bunkers, etc. Without thousands of people, Einstein would never have done what he could have done.
Yep, and it was war that helped spark that.
This, in fact, is a good framing for the the synthesis of the great man and the emergent theories.
Yeah,
it's like
you need both, because without the US going blank check.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean without Einstein this was inevitable, and so it's one of those. Maybe for atomic bombs, perhaps you could argue that it is science.
Might not.
I think we have this kind of synthesis. I think the great man theory is valid, and I'm just going to call the synthesis of the emergent and the great man just the great man, just to summarize it. But I do think the great man theory is valid. I think Thomas Carlyle is right in a way. And then we can contrast this with Nima Parvini's view on elitism, which is that a small and organized minority is what controls society and always has controlled society, using the various institutions of power in society, being the government, the law, the media, the universities, any other major social institutions, whoever controls these, and this is what famously, historically, you had women had a massive social influence through the. Do you guys know who Mary Whitehouse? She was an English woman who, I can't remember the name of the organization, but it was something like Concerned Housewives or something like that in the 60s. But it had 4 million members, and she was very socially conservative, and she was opposing the sexual revolution. And this was a tremendously influential organization. And so it was like this organized minority. 4 million people is still a minority, but it was still lost in the end. But this is the argument from the elite theorists. Like, look, actually, there is no sort of populism, as in the percolation of ideas coming up and just forming this natural organic evolution of society. That's not really true. What it is, organized minorities that take over institutions and impose their will on the people below while thinking about the things that the minority is imposing on them, and so go along with the narratives. And this is why narratives are so important. This is why the Democrats are so committed to narratives. If they lose the narrative, then essentially all of their legitimacy is gone, because they are a great example of what the Italian elite theorists are saying. If we take over society, by taking over the institutions, we can just filter our ideology and essentially brainwash the population into believing what we want. And so what I think we're seeing here is the conflict between the great man and the elite theorist, right? The elite, the minority, the organized minority. And I think we saw that in Trump, and now we're seeing it in Elon. What do you guys think of this?
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of merit to that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting idea, because It's very compelling, isn't it? The idea that you need the man to fulfill, even if there are the circumstances, you need somebody to actually do the thing.
Yeah. You need the
and you can see this at Twitter right now. All of the infrastructure was there to do what Elon is currently doing, but without Elon, it would never have been done.
Yep.
5 minutes, but I like it.
There's a lot of people who use elite theory to try and dismantle the legitimacy of democracy. I know that that's kind of part of the conversation. So the votes don't really matter because we'll just propagandize people to vote how we want them to vote, which is sometimes true, yeah. I don't think
Trump
it's
showed us that's not true. Trump
also sometimes not true, yeah. It's not like a complete correlation there.
Yeah, it's not necessary. And a great man can be brought to power through democracy. How did Adolf Hitler get into the position he was in, right? He was voted into office. So
in my reading on elite theory, I haven't read academic agent stuff on it, but I've read some other people. When I was doing my fascism video, some of that came up in the Italian stuff. And there is this sense that it's not just elites ruling over everything forever, because the disenfranchised masses, they can also generate their own elites. But the issue is that these like sub-elites end up getting co-opted into the main structure.
Or there's what they call a circulation of elites.
Yeah.
In,
so even though the direction of society can sometimes change, and sometimes the masses do have a say in that, what ends up happening is the nature of power is such that you're always going to have some elite class.
Yes. And that's true, obviously. But the question is, how much influence do the masses have on the direction of social progress and development? And the elite theorists would have you believe not much, which is probably generally true, say, but democracy is unique and it gives actually the masses a way of creating a champion in the form of the great man. And I think that's what we saw with Trump, which is why they had to destroy him. And this is what we're seeing now with Elon, literally him being like power to the people. Weirdly, the pro-democracy people, quote unquote, never say that. They never say power to the people. It's now the great man who has to be like, yeah, no, this is my constituency. It's just ordinary Americans. Isn't that
that's true, actually. Yeah, where you have a lot of people on the left who they worship democracy, but they don't care about the voters.
Yeah, democracy means majority rule. That's what Elon is advertising, basically.
The famous...
That's the thing. When they lose the vote, they're losing their democracy. It isn't their democracy, because it's not our democracy. Right? It's not the thing we want. And so anyway, I think that this actually is a really useful way of looking at this. And this is why you can see who's our guy and who's not. You could get a phony elitist who came along being like, but they would not generate the sort of opposition from the organized minority that Elon Musk is generating. And the fact that he's generating the correct opposition shows that he's a populist and he's the great man, because it's Elon's will that's making all of this happen. This has been a lot of effort for Elon. This wouldn't have just happened accidentally.
A lot of effort and a lot of will to actually do it. As he, again, I don't think he understood the amount of pushback he would get, but he would have gone into this knowing that he was stepping into the mousetrap there.
He's made up his mind. He has decided right and wrong, and he is now enacting right and wrong as he views it. And so being autistic means he doesn't really care about their opinions. Like, he will just appeal to his populist base, who will support him, obviously, because he's their man. He's acting in their interest. I don't give a fuck what the negatives of Elon are. He's the only guy we've got. So anyway, I just think that the great man and the elite theorists, the elite theory is a useful way of analyzing the situation at the moment.
In a row, did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever give up. I mean, I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated.